stream's going. And we can put people with some hands up. Okay, we got Cheryl as co-host. Let's make Tammy co-host. You're allowed up to 2 co-hosts. So Tammy, I just invited you to co-host with us here. Meta wants to mind. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. 1 more minute here. Oh, we're at the top of the hour. I'm ready. You ready, Cheryl?
Maybe you should talk. Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm ready.
Sorry, Cheryl. Alrighty.
Okay, well, that's the end of the song, and here comes your favorite sound, Cheryl. And that can only mean one thing. There it is. Here we go. Welcome back. And glad to see everybody. Happy Thursday, wherever you happen to be. And Carl, I imagine you're back in the UK at this point, and I imagine Ellen's back in Oslo. And it was such a blast having y'all and Ame and others here in Stockholm. But by the way, Carl, you missed the snow. I woke up just an hour ago to see Stockholm covered in 10 centimeters of snow. And this city is particularly beautiful when it's covered in snow. It was kind of designed for it, I think one would say. And so the Swedes are going to be very happy that they...
Yeah, that's sensible.
Yeah. Need to change to special shoes for that?
No, they actually start changing the shoes when the snow starts melting, actually, which is called slusk. Yes. It's called slusk in Swedish. And Swedes, while they love nothing more than snow, they hate nothing more than slusk. So it's this delicate relationship they have with winter.
Truth be told, I over-prepared and actually brought a pair of boots with me that stayed in my bag, unfortunately.
Yeah, I made the same mistake when I moved to Stockholm 9 years ago. I brought polar expedition boots, having never been in snow myself.
Yeah.
And came to learn that I was wildly over-prepared for the winter, and that now I use running shoes like a normal person does. So, Craig, happy white Thursday morning to you here in Stockholm.
Yeah, good morning. Nice to have some snow.
I know, right? You can hear the happiness in his voice. So,
I like the captions here, Tyler.
Yeah? What about captions?
I'm liking it.
Okay.
I got the captions turned on, and it's interesting to see how everything is being captioned out here. It's easy.
Okay, well, let's jump into it because we did the air horn. We're now 3 minutes beyond the start time, so let's get into the top headline. Cheryl, you please share them at the top of the Twitter space. I will share them at the top of the Clubhouse room. The first story is that Square, which has been in the news a bit lately, Jack Dorsey's in the news again today. Jack Dorsey's Square changes the name to Block. Ba-doom, psh. I know that sounds like an Onion article. It's not. He's changing.
How very meta of them.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus, Carl. You're going 3 dimensions deep with that meta joke. So it's very clever. Very, very clever. Payments giant Square will change its name to Block effective December 10th. The move comes as Square expands beyond its original credit card reader business with a focus on new technologies such as blockchain. Get it? You get it? Square CEO Jack Dorsey stepped down from his role as Twitter CEO on Monday. And we were wondering, I wonder if Jack stepping down from Twitter has anything to do with the blockchain and his whole obsession, not even a mild one, a rather raging case of blockchain fever. This dude has Bitcoin fever. And this is right in line with I said, this guy is on a mission from the heavens above. Like he is literally believes he has found his purpose for why his parents copulated and born him onto this planet Earth. And he feels like he's here to bring Satoshi's vision to fruition, which is to harness the power of decentralized finance to bring financial equity to the planet. And God bless him. What an incredible mission he's on. I mean, it's kind of rare. I mean, Elon's got his mission to get humanity multiplanetary. I'm not exactly sure what Jeff Bezos' mission is, but it sure seems like Jack has got his mission cut out for him. And changing Square to Block, that ain't some mild thing. Changing like a multi-billion-dollar company name, that's a brand that they spent over a decade building. That's not something you do flippantly. And for those who don't remember, I remember when Jack was starting Square, and the year before leading Square, he was took this interesting sabbatical year off he kind of got pushed out of Twitter. And because, by the way, for those who, a lot of people think they know, I think I know a lot more than most during that, of what was happening at that time, as I was kind of in the circle. Jack was, he does deserve full credit for the kind of creation of the protocol of, these microblogging, as it was called at the time. Real-time microblogging. That was the buzzwords in 2007 when it was getting started. And that was our, what we compared it to, because it was like blogging, but very small and in real time, because blogging, you would discover it later. This was driven by SMS, hence real time. And it was exclusively SMS at the start. And there was no app. It was pre-iPhone. So anyway, then because he's a developer, fundamentally, he had never run a company before. He was an employee at the company. And it took off. Evan Williams, who had run Blogger before that, he was actually the boss of the company, and he let Jack have quite a bit of influence in the start of Twitter. But when Twitter took off like a rocket, holy cow, did it explode and reached escape velocity, and it became a very real company with very real investors and, huge untapped potential. It might have been a bit more than Jack was at the time had the skills to operate that rocket. Evan, having done Blogger before, might have been better equipped in terms of skill set to manage the company, and perhaps the board felt that way, and that's why Jack, had to step down from his early leadership role. So he coincidentally around that same time met somebody who had the vision for a little device, a little plastic square credit card scanner reader that you plug into the audio port of your iPhone. I know we don't have audio ports anymore. We used to have a 3.5 millimeter audio port to plug in your headphones, and he built this little magnetic stripe, like the magnetic stripe on the back of your credit card. You plug this tiny little plastic device in your phone, and now your phone can swipe credit cards and read credit cards and accept credit cards. And what a genius development that was. And that allowed anyone with a phone to accept credit cards. That's particularly amazing for businesses who used to spend a lot of money for credit card readers in their businesses and pay a monthly fee for them, no less. So this was truly genius. And that's why the name Square, because the little device that went into the phone itself was square. And square, it also has another meaning of like being equal or balanced or settling a transaction. You square up with somebody when you settle a transaction. Kind of a genius double entendre. So, having built that brand and spent, like I said, a decade building that brand, this is no trivial thing to rename it. That's not something you do on a whim. That's not something, you must have a strong kind of feeling or sentiment if you're going to go through the wherewithal of renaming it to something like Block. Unless, of course, you are on a mission from God, like the Blues Brothers, and he is on a mission from God, and he really when he makes moves like this, it makes it all the more clear to me, at least. Unless I could be crazy, and in fact, I am.
No. I think you're spot on, Tyler. Can you imagine the cost to his psyche of not like chasing this, because he understands the space. He's in a position where he understands the technology. He's looking at the way that it's going, irrelevant of what anybody here thinks about crypto or coins or anything. DeFi and blockchain isn't going anywhere. It's a categorical fact at this point. It has its really good uses. It's not going anywhere. It is the future in one sense or another. And, Twitter's bigger than anything that, anybody in here will maybe build. But where is it going now? It's got to that point where it's this hulking monolith that has these incremental changes and releases and stuff. Where's the excitement in that anymore? You can roll out a feature, or you can take the money and the knowledge that you have with Dorsey has, and you can invest it into shaping what will literally be the next stage of the web. I mean, I know which one I would want pinned to my legacy.
Yep. So let's get into if anyone has a thought, feel free to raise your hand, and happy to hear everybody's thought. That's sort of the format here at Tech News Around the World. Otherwise,
I've got a quick comment.
Go ahead, Craig.
There was also a little bit about how the company's divisions are named. And so Square is Block, and then there's the Cash App, there's Tidal, and then this TB-DEX, the decentralized exchange is called Spiral, apparently. So those are the divisions of the company. And I think what's going to be interesting is, because I think he's planning somehow to roll out one of these divisions or part of this company as a DAO. Somebody remind me this morning what a DAO stands for, but
Decentralized Autonomous Organization.
Thank you. So I think that the exchange is likely to become a DAO. And so somehow he needs to roll that part out or create this thing that's not tied to a corporation.
Right. Well, here's another point. So a lot of people are tweeting about this, as you might imagine. Aaron Levy, the CEO of Box, who's one of the funniest people on Twitter, says, I feel like someone didn't send me the memo that we're all changing our company names this quarter. And Kevin Roos, who you might remember that name because we mentioned his name yesterday. He's the tech, quote unquote, tech journalist over at the New York Times, who wrote the article 24 hours ago that Jack Dorsey's resigning from Twitter, just step down and do, because he's just tired of running Twitter and he's got nothing better to do. He's gonna start picking, retire essentially. That he was stepping down from Twitter because he was frustrated with Twitter, and no, as we made it very clear to you, Kevin, he's got a bigger mission, and now this is additional evidence of that argument. And so he did a 3-letter tweet about this new rebranding of Square to Block, just saying, HMM. Yeah, Kevin, that's the sound of your brain. That's the sound of the smoke coming out of your brain, realizing you were very wrong about your assessment of Jack's resignation from Twitter. It's not that he has something much bigger to do. That's why he was stepping. That's the primary issue. And I love, Carl, the way that you said this, which is you don't step down from something that you created like Twitter flippantly either. These are, not minor moves that involve a bit of risk, not a non-significant amount of risk, a rather significant amount of risk involved. You don't throw in risk into billion-dollar publicly traded companies unnecessarily. But I love how you said that the mental cost of not. Let me put it this way: if you've ever felt that you've been tasked or asked by God Himself to do something with your time on planet Earth, and you don't do it, you will be plagued with that every waking moment of every waking day. And if you've not felt that, I hope someday you do. It's a beautiful scenario to be in. That, and I'll do a very revealing, I had this happen to me once before, and I asked for it. And I believe in this. This gets rather metaphysical. What was it? I do believe that if you say if you open yourself up and you say, you know what, we're all a bunch of ants here on planet Earth, put your ego aside and just realize, you're a beautiful flower that's, here for a very short time, like a cherry blossom, and you'll be gone very soon. If you come to that realization, put your ego aside and you ask God, whatever God you may follow, or what the universe, or whatever you want to call it, what would you like me to do with my time on Earth? You put me here. I have hands. I have feet. I can do things. And what would you like me to do? Please tell me what you would like me to do. And by the way, I got that idea from one of the, not only one, some of the most successful people on planet Earth that I've had the luxury of having dinner with have employed that same concept, and that resulted in their missions in life, very profound missions in life. And when I did that, not even 24 hours later, I received a message, which was to bring awareness to the water stress of the planet, how we're likely to run out of a lot of water in the short term, and the water, food, energy scarcity escalation that we're all starting to feel, and the pressures that we're starting to feel, and to get entrepreneurs and developers and this ecosystem and audience and community that I've been a part of building in the Nordic ecosystem. I was told I need to engage all of those entrepreneurs and use my platform, which is this big annual conference where we get, 5, 6, 7,000 people every year. And I was told I need to convert that event into a vehicle for driving the awareness of these critical issues, and to drive home the message that we might likely hit the proverbial iceberg on the Titanic that we find ourselves on in 2020. Well, this was actually 2016 when this happened. And so that involved renting out a venue for about $60,000 for one day, and bringing everybody, opening up my email list and inviting everybody to the event, and inviting in all of these politicians and UN leaders and ministers, and spending months doing that, and bring them all together and put them on stage and do that. And
where was this, Tyler?
Stockholm, 2016. I called it the Solutions Summit because we were looking for solutions to the UN global goals, as they're called, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And there's 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, as people know. And what we don't have is a good grip on the solutions. There are people working on solutions, especially now in 2021, thank God. In 2016, geeks and entrepreneurs and developers were not aware that the UN had built this framework of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, the global goals. And I wanted to drive the awareness about this and highlight the point that we have enough video games and dating apps and dog walking apps, and what we really need are apps that solve, or solutions for water and food and energy and etc. So I did that, and to be honest, I didn't have a choice, because once that fire, that spark of, and I'll be honest, it didn't come from me. It felt like it really came from a foreign place. And it was very adamant and insistent that I do this, and I did do this, and I did get something incredible out of it, much more than I ever would have imagined. But that's my own personal story with what happens when you feel like you're on a mission, and I having been plagued with that, and I say that in a beautiful way, that Jack himself seems to be demonstrating similar behaviors with how he's resigning from Twitter and renaming Square to Block and doing the TBD company, etc., etc. I'm just watching somebody who I can sense is going through similar motions, making seemingly radical moves without a lot of second guessing. Because when you feel like you're acting as an agent on behalf of this far greater power, you don't second guess it. You just let it do its thing. So anyway, Craig?
I just was going to ask, 2016, was that the year you had the VIP party at the Stadshuset?
I do the VIP party at Stockholm City Hall every year. And that's the the most prestigious venue, as Craig knows, in all of Scandinavia, honestly. It's where they do the Nobel Prize dinner. And other than the Nobel Prize dinner, I believe my dinner is the only other dinner there every year. So it's really interesting to watch what Jack's doing because, like I said, I just wanted to tell that little story because that's why I think I have a little unique perspective on what he might, why he's going through these motions as he is. So the next story, second biggest story of the day. We ready, Cheryl or Magda?
I just wanted to mention one more thing about the new name block, which I think is so clever, not just because, of the association with blockchain, but essentially one of the biggest difficulties when you do a rebrand is that you need to build a whole new association in people's minds of what that name means. But in a way, block kind of is a square, when you think about square and you when you say the word block, most people will visualize a 3D square essentially, right? So like a cube or something, right? So in a way they've kind of taken their name and upgraded it to a three-dimensional type of level. So I just think it's so clever because they're not going to have such a difficult time for people to get used to the name.
Yeah, well, when you see the video, I'm tweeting out a video now to the Tech News Twitter account, which is from their new Twitter account, which is @blocks, and it's a verified account. It's for the new company, and when you watch their little cute animation that they made, you better understand exactly what Magda is pointing out, which is it's a three-dimensional rendering of a square is a two-dimensional objects, and blocks, of course, are three-dimensional objects, and they're taking things to the third dimension. It's a kind of a very apt and poetic point. So, the next article, shall we, Cheryl? The number 2 article today is, where did it go? It's right here. Number 2, from CNBC. Meta, formerly known as Facebook, expands the number of eligible regulatory licenses for running crypto ads on Facebook and Instagram from 3 to 27. And what does that mean exactly? Well, what's that? It says Facebook on Wednesday announced its decision to reverse long-standing policy that prevented most cryptocurrency companies from running ads on its service. The move comes after the company tried and failed to launch a cryptocurrency that was intended to send money easily around the world via the company's services. The company's new policy is huge for the crypto industry and will allow more retail investors to access cryptocurrencies than ever before. I've got an interesting thought as I read that, which is this a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that David Marcus, the leader, one of the most senior people in all of Facebook, who just announced his stepping down by the end of this year, probably even in the next couple weeks as he goes on a long winter holiday, means that Facebook's own efforts into crypto, called Diem, and their wallet called Novi, which was run by David Marcus, who just resigned, now that project appears to be on the rocks, now they're going to let competitors in the crypto space advertise on Facebook, where previously they weren't really letting competitors to their own massive ambitions market themselves on Facebook, and now they are. Is this a coincidence or not? Okay, I think it's not. Let me pin the article to the top of the clubhouse room for those who are...
It'll be interesting to see if they still have the same ambition of controlling their own stablecoin, or if they move on to a different strategy.
Exactly right. It's that was a. It's also going to be very interesting to see what David Marcus does now that he's not going to be at Facebook, and what are we going to do if David Marcus joins Jack at Block? That would be a truly mind-blowing move. It's a brand new company. It's just getting started. He's the TBD company. He could bring him in as a sort of, even as a sort of co-founder. That would be a wild move. And that would get an insane amount of hype and attention. So, the next article, shall we, Cheryl, is number 3. from the Washington Post in its end-of-year threat report. Meta, formerly known as Facebook, says it took down several global disinformation networks, from Canada and Norway, including anti-vaccine groups and groups linked to state actors. I called it Canada, Norway, as usual. So, what are these state groups? I wonder what countries they're talking about. What a wild puzzle this one is. Let's get Sherlock Holmes on the case, everybody. Anybody got an idea which kind of state groups they might be referring to? I'm really at a loss here. The Wall Street Journal article says, Washington Post, Facebook reveals broad takedown of global disinformation networks, including some tied to anti-vaccine groups and state actors. The takedown described in the company's latest threat report demonstrate how the cat and mouse game between Facebook and bad actors is escalating, as I've been warning you about every day for the past 6 months. And it's a real difficult, this has been going on since more or less the beginning. And let me share this link at the top of the Clubhouse room, as we do with this brilliant new pin feature. And then Cheryl's pinning it at the top of the Twitter Space room simultaneously for those over there. So there we go. And unfortunately, Clubhouse doesn't support that particular link. That's unfortunate. So sometimes that happens. Let's see if I can do a quick little URL tweaking to make it work. Nope, it doesn't want to work on Clubhouse. That's okay. So this Wall Street, Washington Post article, there's a bunch of other people covering this. Facebook itself covers it, so let's read it right from the source rather than the regurgitations from CNN, BBC, NPR, Vice, and CNET and Bloomberg, who have all covered this. Facebook says, oh boy, here's the CNN version. Are you ready for this? As predicted, Facebook says Belarusian KGB used fake accounts to stoke border crisis. Okay, and CNN's got their audio on their videos on audio play. That's lovely. Facebook, the company formerly known as Facebook, says it has evidence that the Belarusian KGB used fake accounts to pose as journalists and activists to stoke tensions about the crisis at the border between Belarus and Poland. And fortunate we have Magda and Piotr on stage, who are both right there on the ground. And here's a quote. These fictitious personas posted criticism of Poland in English, Polish, and Kurdish, including pictures and videos about Polish border guards allegedly violating migrants' rights. Meta said in an announcement on Wednesday. To make the fake personas convincing, some of the accounts likely used profile pictures of fake faces generated using artificial intelligence, so-called deep fake technologies, which is clever, but there's ways to detect these deep fake created faces, which are faces that aren't of actual people but look incredibly convincing. However, there are tools that you can use to analyze those deep fake created faces to determine that they were deep fake created. So it's a nice try. In total, Meta said it had identified and removed 41 Facebook accounts, 4 Instagram accounts, and 5 Facebook groups linked to the Belarusian KGB. So I just want to come out right now and apologize to Canada and Norway for assuming that it was both of them. Turns out it was Belarus, and I wonder, as Poland's prime minister recently said out loud publicly, that the brain behind this effort comes from the Kremlin. Those were his words. Comes directly from the Kremlin. So he's accusing Big Daddy Vladdy of being the big bad bully behind this conflict at the border. That's Poland's prime minister's perspective, publicly. CNN is reaching out to the Belarusian KGB for comment. Notably, Meta also found a separate network that originated in Poland and included fake personas posing as migrants from the Middle East, trying to dissuade people from entering the European Union. It's coming from both sides. They're both politically weaponizing social media. This is fantastic. Here, quote, these fake personas claim to be sharing their own negative experiences of trying to get from Belarus to Poland and posted about migrants' difficult lives in Europe. They also posted about Poland's strict anti-migrant policies and anti-migrant neo-Nazi activity in Poland, the company said. Oh, dear Lord. Meta, aka Facebook, did not say who specifically was behind the network of accounts, only saying it originated in Poland. The network included 31 Facebook accounts, 4 Instagram accounts, and 4 Facebook groups, the company said. And that's quite an interesting move, where it seems the implication here is that Poland itself is making fake social media accounts that appear to be from migrants, people seeking refugee status in the EU, saying, don't come, don't bother, this is terrible here, this was a terrible idea, turn back, everyone head back to Afghanistan, ostensibly because that's where the origins of where these people are coming from. And these were the people who fled when the Taliban were entering Kabul, and they were politely bussed through to the border of Europe by our friends over there in Belarus, and brought to the border. And the Belarusian army is helping those folks try and knock down the temporary barbed wire fence to cross during the evenings, where it's now freezing. And Magda or Piotr, could you give us an update on what's going on there from the Polish? Yeah.
No, Tyler, it's funny because it is fake news and those are fake accounts, but in a way, I ask myself whether they're not in a way doing people a favor with those accounts, because essentially what's happening is more and more people are kind of starting to get shipped out of Afghanistan and being put on the border, and they're in horrible conditions. To be fair, at least it's warm in there, right? And in Poland, it's you were mentioning snow in Sweden. It was snowing here yesterday as well. I'm not seeing snow today on the ground, at least not in Warsaw, but it is pretty cold and they are in horrible conditions. So in a way, and nobody can find out about it because those people are not getting out of there, right? So there's no way for them to send messages or say anything about the conditions and about how it's actually probably not the brightest idea to come. And if somebody offers to take you out of there and takes money for it or whatever, you're basically getting screwed. So just don't do it. So in a way, it's fake news. Obviously it's fake news because it's a way to kind of get rid of the crisis, right? The more
the parent
people come,
company
the more
of
dangerous
Facebook,
the situation
Meta,
gets.
says it had.
Yeah.
And this way it's kind of stopping people from coming over. But you mentioned, this is kind of I don't know, social media warfare or something. But in a way, in Poland, we have the additional problem of actually not really knowing what's happening there, because in the media, on TV, it's exactly the same situation. People are not allowed to report what is going on the border. So, you have certain accounts where you have, doctors who are sometimes allowed to help people on the border. So you get some information, but generally, most of the news is on the media and it's completely controlled by the government. So you're only hearing what the government wants you to hear, so you can't really tell what the truth is, really.
Fair enough.
I was going to say, Nyla, that's actually I'm not in Poland. I live in the UK at the moment, but I've got family back in Poland, so I communicate with them daily. And so typical Polish approach, really. I'm not surprised with this fake accounts trying to tell immigrants not to come to Poland. But at the same time, you can clearly tell it's a bit of a attack from Russia as well. There's obviously tensions been there for a number of years now. Between Poland is in a very unique place in Europe. So yeah, you can tell, everything is orchestrated by government. Really, Polish government and Polish newspaper media will not really give you the true story of what's happening there.
Okay. Yes, thank you for that. And then my friend Łukasz, hold on one second.
We have Michelle in the audience.
I see that. I just invited. Oh, Michelle is now a speaker, and Michelle is a friend who joins us each day who happens to work at Facebook. So, Michelle, is there any? I know Facebook just put out this announcement, and I'm going to read it. I have the site here, Meta's Adversarial Threat Report, which was just released by the head of security policy, Nathaniel Gleicher. And the summary says that we're sharing a detailed end-of-year threat report on 6 adversarial networks we found and removed for coordinated inauthentic behavior, CIBs. And we removed 4 CIB operations from China, Palestine, Poland, and Belarus. 1 network in Italy and France for brigading, and 1 network in Vietnam for mass reporting. And what that means is, in Vietnam, they created a network to report content that they don't like, that the Vietnam government is not in favor of. So they report coordinatedly to Facebook to say, hey, take down all of this anti-government posts here in Vietnam. And so they work as a team. And Facebook even exposed this. We read this headline a month ago where they found that the Vietnam government had created thousands of accounts. And those accounts happened to work, strangely, precisely from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. with an hour off for lunch every day. And they also happen to have IP addresses located at government buildings. Wow, what an interesting coincidence. So it's, governments are using Facebook as a means of, controlling narratives, creating narratives, minimizing negative narratives, in all kinds of different ways. And it says the global threats we tackle have significantly evolved since we first started sharing our findings about coordinated inauthentic behavior in 2017. In addition, adversarial networks don't strive to neatly fit our policies or only violate one at a time. To account for this constantly shifting threat environment, we build our defenses with the expectation that they will not stop, but rather adapt and try new tactics. We add new layers of defense to address potential gaps from multiple angles. Our goal over time is to make these behaviors more costly and difficult to hide and less effective. Today we're sharing our first report that brings together multiple network disruptions for distinct violations of our security policies. And then they break down into the different categories from China, Palestine, Poland, Belarus, Vietnam. And Michelle, I see you joined as a speaker. Are you able to say anything about this from a Facebook perspective or from a non-Facebook personal perspective?
Yeah, I think it's more like 3 years ago we started sharing this kind of report, but the idea is, to your point, to make it harder and harder to have this kind of behavior on the platform, but also to make it easier for people to see the progresses we're making as a company. So I think, we will continue to publish more of this kind of finding just for our users to also understand the efforts we're making.
Right.
Now, when it comes to the government, I think we publish what we know, but we can't confirm that it's some government actions, like particularly the Chinese government. So it's not proven.
Right. Well, because they take steps digitally to make sure that they have plausible deniability. Both the BBC and NPR are both reporting. Here's the BBC headline says, Facebook uncovers Chinese network behind fake expert about COVID. And NPR headline says, Facebook takes down China-based network spreading false COVID-19 claims. Now, are we to assume this is a non-government, that these are regular Chinese citizens who are Chinese-based network spreading false COVID-19 claims? Highly unlikely. So
the idea is that we don't have any evidence.
Of course,
of that, so.
Yeah. Well, they're of course hiding their tracks to not provide you the strong evidence. They're not the count isn't from Xi Jinping himself. It's so the BBC article says Facebook owner Meta platform has removed more than 500 accounts linked to an online disinformation network primarily based in China. The accounts had promoted the claims of a fake Swiss biologist named Wilson Edwards who alleged that the U.S. was meddling in efforts to find the origins of COVID-19. Edwards' comments had been widely carried by Chinese state media outlets. However, the Swiss embassy said that it was unlikely this person even existed. This is old news. This is like 5 months old. I'm curious what's new here. Facebook said, they addressed this in this report, that the annual report that they just came out with, which Michelle kindly just referred to as their, this is clearly an effort to be very transparent about what's going on and keep people updated about this constantly evolving threat, which I think they're very smart to do. And Michelle, I wonder, are they doing this because to stay ahead of the narratives? Because if they didn't do this report, somebody inside of Facebook, a disgruntled former employee, wink, wink to our friend Frances Haugen, the whistleblower, would find some documents and say, Facebook is filled of states that are constantly trying to spread misinformation about COVID and the border conflict, and Facebook plays a role in geopolitical instability and yada, yada, yada. And by doing this report, Facebook's like, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what we're doing about it. They stay out in front and are able to manage the narrative around these issues rather than having a whistleblower go to the Wall Street Journal, creating some fear porn based on assumptions and assertions of half-truths. And this allows Facebook to stay on top of the PR dumpster fire.
I don't know if it's like from a PR perspective being ahead of the story, but in general, we making a consistent effort to be more transparent overall,
right?
Because I don't think people were aware of the effort we're making. So now we will proactively be more transparent on these kind of topics and more.
So, Meta said in the report, the social media campaign was largely unsuccessful and targeted English-speaking audiences in the U.S., Britain, and Chinese-speaking audiences in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Tibet. Earlier in July, an account posing as a Swiss that's when we covered it back in July. So, the NPR article says the China-based network was one of 6 that Facebook removed in November for abusing its platform, a reminder that bad actors around the world are using social media to promote false information and harass opponents. The other operations, including one from Hamas and 2 others based in Poland and Belarus, that were focused on the migration crisis on the country's shared border. It's so interesting to see that turn of events going on there with that conflict at the border of Belarus and Poland. And for those who don't know, and let me just read this quote before I say what I was going to say. Here's a quote. It says, "This campaign was a hall of mirrors, endlessly reflecting a single fake persona," Ben Nemo, who investigates influence operations at Meta, wrote on the company's report. The Chinese operation was an example of what Meta calls coordinated inauthentic behavior, in which adversaries use fake accounts for influence operations, as Russian operatives did by impersonating Americans on Facebook in the run-up to the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Oh! Interesting. So now Facebook's saying out loud that, or NPR is reporting out loud about Russian operatives making fake accounts to influence the 2016 presidential elections by pretending to be American accounts, etc. Anyway, what's interesting about the Poland-Belarus border conflict is, the last report that I read that we discussed here, there was 15. Oh, I have some confidential news bomb to drop on this issue, which Magda might be able to confirm. And maybe you can confirm it by the time we meet tomorrow. There was reported to be originally 5,000 and then 10,000 and then 15,000 Polish troops on the border. And the last report was there was just a few thousand potential, migrants, potential, people seeking amnesty or seeking refugee status in the EU. And that border is the border of the EU. They're in Poland, between Poland and Belarus. And the question is, why was Belarus assisting in helping those, refugees get to the Polish border? Why not just keep them in Belarus or Ukraine? My God, there's certainly a whole lot of space. Russia is not short of space. Let's put it that way. So why not just keep them there if you're so interested in the welfare of these folks? And it's because the perspective from the Polish president is that Putin is using Belarus as a puppet, as many people have claimed many times over the years, that Lukashenko's just a Putin puppet, and that Putin's using Lukashenko as his puppet to push these refugees into Europe, knowing that would destabilize Europe, as it did when the Syrian refugees came in 2015, 2016. And the EU is very adamant about resisting these refugees coming in, knowing how sensitive things got when the Syrians came in 2015, 2016. And particularly in Germany and Europe, who took in proportionately the biggest number of those refugees from Syria. And I heard on Thanksgiving, I had dinner with a very well-connected person here in Sweden who informed me, and I have to be very careful because I was told this is confidential. It is confidential. It's highly confidential, but this person knows. I know for a fact they know that Sweden itself has sent assistance in the form of troops to secure that border in Poland, between Poland and Belarus. That has not been reported anywhere. And they have a very special name for that envoy as observers or what have you. But you would be correct in assuming that that the EU, Germany, and Sweden in particular, and I'm told from someone who knows, who has direct links, that Sweden is providing boots on the ground to protect that border from folks coming in, and that would be a really even if that was reported in Sweden, that would be huge news for Swedes, because that is a hugely hotly contested issue in Sweden about refugees and migrants. So Maria, who is also Polish but lives in Berlin, is got her hand up. So I want to make sure she gets the mic. So making you a speaker, Maria. And are you able? There you are. Welcome, Maria.
Hi, guys. I just wanted to kind of add the 2 cents to say that, there's been a lot of help coming in, probably a little bit under the radar from other countries, also from the U.S., to the Polish troops, because the situation is quite
intense.
Obviously quite tense,
yeah.
And we, as always, are put in between, the difficult situation. And so there's, of course, to what Magda said, there's the official reporting that we get is very much controlled. So under the radar, there's a lot of international support, because they are obviously all shitting their pants, worried about what's going to happen.
Right. And let me just explain, because if the border is opened in any capacity, these few thousand folks that are seeking refugee status will quickly be followed. There's currently, according to the UN and Pakistan and Sweden, they've all have estimated and agree on the numbers, that there are many more people in Afghanistan hoping to leave. That current number is 22 million who are expected to die this winter. That is the report. This is no exaggeration. This is a concrete estimation by experts, observing on the ground, that due to the economic collapse happening in Afghanistan, due to the mismanagement from the Taliban, that they lack essentials like water and food. And they estimate that there will be 22 million people dying in the next month or two this winter. And they, of course, would love to be escorted out through... They, of course, would have to go through just north of the Caspian Sea, through Ukraine and Belarus, to the border of Poland. So now you understand why Germany, Sweden, America, if this is an all-hands-on-deck issue, because if that border is breached, you could see this could be escalate into an incredibly serious scenario.
Yes, but just the one thing to remember, it's not really like nobody wants to go to Poland, per se, right? They want to walk through Poland. So this is why there's support from the German government, the American government, everybody else from Western Europe, because those refugees, they want to go west. So
yes, with all due respect, Maria. Yeah. You know how much I love Poland. You know my mother's family's from Poland. She's right. They
want to join me in Berlin.
That's right.
Nobody wants to stay in Poland.
In fact, there's video of them even saying that they're angry at the Polish border patrol for not letting them through, because they don't want to. They're even saying with their limited English, they're saying Germany, Germany, Germany. We want to go to Germany.
Yeah. So Polish, as as beautiful as our country is, they know that there's nothing for them there. So all they want to do is have a passage.
Let's be fair. Aside from the Ruski pierogies, which they would be,
which are great.
They would be foolish not to stop and at least try the pierogies.
Yeah, for sure.
But, yes, they are saying themselves, the legitimate, not fake Facebook accounts, these are actual legitimate people. There's video of them saying, please let us through. We don't want to stay in your country. Let us through. We want to go to Germany. And the reality is Germany's telling Poland, don't let them in. And, of course, they would go to Sweden as well, because Sweden has a reputation for welcoming refugees. So, in their mind, yeah, they're going to pass through Poland, as Maria just said, and preferably go to places even much more enjoyable, with all due respect to my friends in Poland. Personally, I would go to Portugal, but that's just me. So, yeah, it's a very tense situation there on that border. So we can go on to the next one. Yes,
Tyler.
Yes.
Maybe one more comment, because I think this is quite clever from Putin's perspective, however he is meddling in this, because in a way I think he kind of has, he's killing two birds with one stone, proverbially, because I mean, I don't know the real situation, but I think Lukashenko, is kind of a little bit of a threat to Putin as well, as in he's kind of gaining power and control. And if he gets too big, if he gets too much influence, that's also not so great. So, on the one hand, Lukashenko doing all this is destabilizing the EU, which, of course, Putin loves. That's his goal. But then if he doesn't succeed and basically, the NATO or the EU or whatever kind of put Belarus in their place, so they show that Belarus isn't as strong as Belarus thinks it is, that's kind of another win for Putin. So whichever way the situation goes, it's a win-win situation for him,
You brought up another interesting point, which is Russia has added a whole bunch of troops, I believe 100,000, in fairness, on Russian soil, but on the borders of Belarus and Ukraine. And the U.S. and NATO now, of yesterday, officially said, please state your reasons for doing this. And he says, I don't have to answer to you. They're on Russian soil. Go F yourselves. But you giving that kind of an explanation, or not giving any kind of logical explanation, and even the act in doing it itself, doesn't really help the conspiracy theory that this is being driven from the Kremlin. So
this is where it might backfire a bit. I mean, there's 4 NATO armored battalions, I think, across Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. Roughly 1,000 troops each in those, and so a lot less than what Putin has moved. But I think that those battalions may be reinforced and increased in size.
Wouldn't be surprised. So, next, should we go to the next article? Does anyone on the Clubhouse stage have a point to make? Aram? You had your mic open?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My puppy. Sorry.
No problem. Okay, so let's get on to the next one. The next one is Qualcomm announces Snapdragon 8CX Gen 3, a 5-nanometer chip with a 5G and Wi-Fi 6 capacity, promising up to 85% better CPU and up to 60% faster GPU performance compared to Gen 2. That's a significant upgrade in performance and of both CPU and GPU. So, Qualcomm had an event where they were made several announcements, like the G3X Gen 1 gaming platform for Android, and they plan to integrate Google's Vertex AI NAS into their neural processing SDK. It's a whole bunch of super geeky shit. And perhaps the biggest announcement that came out of their big event was the Snapdragon 8 Generation 1, which is the successor to Snapdragon 888. I know that doesn't mean much to most people, but what it does mean is the next generation of smartphones will be 30% faster and 30% more battery efficient, essentially. And Xiaomi has already announced their next phone will have this new processor. Next up, Microsoft announces Teams Essentials, a standalone version of Teams for small and medium businesses with a simplified user interface, because your friends aren't that smart and they need an even simpler version of Teams. And focus on meetings and no Office apps for $4 per month per user. Okay. The next, from the Washington Post. The FPB's rules that let debt collectors send texts and emails and private social media messages to debtors and requires opt-out instructions goes into effect. Federal regulators have given debt collectors the okay to pursue debtors via email, text messages, and social media sites. And that all goes into effect today.
Well, Tyler.
Yes, sir.
Right, so they already do this.
Yes. Yeah.
So currently they still email, they text. The only thing they don't do is social media.
Well, yes. No, there's another thing they don't do, which is what they do in China, which is they partner with your telephone operator. And when someone tries to call you, a friend calls you, they get a message that says, "Are you trying to call Tyler because he owes us $20,000? So they don't do that either. But they could.
I really hope they don't go ahead with that. I mean, just...
It's just a fun... Yeah. Well, by the way, there's also... they partnered with billboard companies and show the faces and identities of people on billboards saying this... and it shows it... They buy the billboards near your residence and your office and show your face on the billboard showing how much money you owe.
So is that a strategy to get people to actually pay their money?
Right. Yeah, well, because there's this thing in Asia called honor, and people get embarrassment is a very strong motivator, particularly in Asia. So the next one is TikTok adds monetization tools for creators. Did you hear that sound? Did somebody hear a sound? I heard a little sound. Did anybody hear that? Can you hear that? I heard a little sound there. Do you hear that sound? That's the sound of social media adding monetization. And it used to be a kind of vacuum of money, and everyone just participated because, they like the ego boost, and they like the hearts and the likes and the follows, and now it's going to be about making money. As TikTok adds monetization tools for creators, including Stripe-powered tips and video GIFs, starting in the United States, the UK, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. TikTok today is announcing new ways for creators to make money from their content. And to be honest, they didn't have a choice because their competitors are all doing this too simultaneously. And if one platform starts making it easy to make money, guess where these people are going to spend more of their time? So TikTok, as much as people love getting followers on TikTok, if you're making real money over on Snapchat and Twitter, as will soon happen, again, they didn't really have a choice. This is going to become... And then John Collison from Stripe, who's one of the co-founders of Stripe, John and Patrick, the two brothers from Ireland, who went to Y Combinator, made Stripe, the world's biggest fintech at $100 billion valuation, which is expected to IPO soon. John took to Twitter to say, "You made it." To TikTok, particularly excited to work with TikTok on creator tipping. But the tipping is done almost identically like it's done in Clubhouse, which is through tipping through Stripe. They're identical in that regard. Where it will get really interesting is if you're able to, and by the way, you will. This is coming. Get ready. I've been telling you this since the first day we started, back in March, that this will turn into social commerce. It's going to become a massive live stream shopping competition because that's where the real money is. These tips is pocket change comparatively. Where the real money is when the platforms, as they have been doing for years in China and Thailand, where I live, the live stream shopping phenomena, where somebody sold $2 billion worth of makeup in 24 hours just a few weeks ago, is so incredibly lucrative. It will take over online shopping. It's the first real threat to Amazon and Alibaba. Well, at which it's been a real threat to Alibaba for a long time in China. It will now become a real threat to Amazon in the US when Twitter and TikTok and Snapchat and all of the social apps, even Spotify has added e-commerce, and they're hiring for an e-commerce platform developer and all of that. And here it comes. And this is just the earliest baby steps towards live stream shopping on TikTok. And by the way, you're gonna love it. This is the part that seems crazy, but I've been watching this in Thailand for a few years now. Thais love, and people throughout Asia love watching the live stream shopping, because you get some of these content creators who are wildly entertaining. And you will sit there and watch those folks for hours, and they sell all of their crazy stuff. It's like a comedy show. And the best folks who do this are making millions and even billions, with a B, billions of dollars. So as soon as you think YouTube creators make a lot of money right now, you have seen nothing yet, because those YouTube creators are getting money from little ads. Wait till you see them making money from the products that they sell on those platforms, where you buy it directly from the live stream without the live stream ever breaking, without you even ever leaving the app, while you're having a conversation with the live stream seller in real time. And they say, "Oh, thank you, Tyler, for your purchase. Yeah, I'll get that out to you tomorrow morning. I see your address. Thank you very much. Feel free to message me tomorrow if you have any problems. And when you get it, I'd appreciate it if you made a little video and shared it on your thing." And that's live commerce shopping. Here it comes. It's tremendously game-changing, huge. All these platforms know it. They're all racing each other to implement it. So there you have it. The next one's from Bloomberg.
I wonder,
Tyler,
One second.
is it
Go ahead.
fiat money or crypto?
Now that's the real question. Thank you for the brilliant question. It seems Magda had the same question. I did
You're
too.
welcome.
Yeah, I had the same question when I spoke with Twitter's chief financial officer Ned in Twitter Spaces 7 months ago, as one of the first 1,000 Twitter Space users, or create room people who could make a Twitter Space. And Ned popped in the room, Twitter CFO, and I said, "Hey Ned, Twitter eventually is going to do live commerce shopping," which, by the way, just launched on Friday. And I said that to him, 6-7 months ago. Sure enough, just went live Friday with Walmart. And I said, when that happens, is it possible that you'll be using Bitcoin as a way to do this? And oh, what a shocking surprise. Twitter also last week is rolling out Bitcoin as a way to make transfer of values between users, and using the Lightning Network, and Square plays an interesting role in this. And I said, Ned, is it possible that because the CEO of Twitter is also the CEO of Square, and Square has an app called the Cash App, which happens to accept Bitcoin, is it possible that every Twitter user will get a Cash App wallet that accepts Bitcoin so that people can pay for all of this live shopping through Bitcoin? And he smiled and said, "That's such an interesting idea." And then I tweeted it, and then he liked it, and kind of acknowledging that, that's where things are headed. And sure enough, 6 months later, that's where we're at. So it appears that on Twitter, it will be possible to do these transactions through Bitcoin, through the little Cash App wallet that Jack is now busy over at Square, now renamed as Block today. That's the top headline, that they just rebranded Square to Block to emphasize blockchain. What a shock, what a surprise. And that the new CEO at Twitter, the former CTO, happens to be the biggest advocate for Bitcoin in all of Twitter. Oh, what a shock, what a surprise. So this could be really, really, really interesting if Twitter and Jack is on this mission from God to roll out the ubiquitous, use case for crypto as a way to purchase, as a way to transfer value, and utilize the tools at his disposal, most namely an app called Twitter, to facilitate this. All the ducks are lining up rather nicely in a row in real time. It's just, we've been watching this ever since I had that question for Ned in that room 7 months ago. And all things keep moving in that direction. So stay tuned, because this is moving, at a not at a snail's pace, and it's a lot of fun to watch. I'm very confident that in the very near future, you will start seeing products on Twitter profiles right below the person's bio, and above their top tweet, there will be a swipeable carousel nearly identical to the pinned tweet at the top of the room, which in Twitter is swipeable itself. And imagine that's a carousel of e-commerce products that you could purchase in real time without leaving the app and have the option to pay via crypto, most namely Bitcoin. So the next articles from...
Hey, Tyler.
Yes, Craig.
I think the other interesting idea, which I know you're very aware of, is being able to, content creators like yourself, being able to, those of us listening or participating, being able to stream you sats while this is going on, and basically paying a small amount, imagine a few US cents or something less than $1. To participate in these.
Correct. And that is the other amazing potential use case that I'm confident Jack is pursuing, that is enabled. This has been a fantasy in the social web for a very long time, which is what's called, we've always referred to it as micropayments, which is, 1 penny, 2 penny, 3 pennies, which a lot of really interesting use cases unlock once that's technically, economically feasible, which it currently wasn't due to the credit card bank transfer system, makes microtransactions not feasible, basically. But if we could get Bitcoin working on Lightning, in other words, get these transaction fees down to practically zero, then microtransactions of a penny or 2 pennies or 3 pennies, or as you said, Satoshis, would enable, the New York Times might have a paywall on an article, and you might be able to pay a penny to read it. So this could be incredibly huge for creators of all types. You could charge a penny to watch your video or photo. There's a whole litany of use cases that would be enabled by micropayments, which that's one of the reasons why platform creators like Jack are very interested in enabling that. They have been for a very long time. And by the way, Facebook very recently was diving into that with their what they called coins, or was it hearts or stars? If Michelle just jumped off the stage, somebody who's a power Facebook user will know what I'm referring to, where you for $1 you get 100, I believe it's called coins, Facebook coins, and then Facebook is now encouraging people watching videos to give a coin to the content creator, which is essentially a penny. You paid $1 for 100 of them. Michelle just DM'd me to say they're called stars. Thank you, Michelle. So Facebook stars, they essentially represent pennies, but you have to buy 100, and then you can allocate your quote-unquote stars. It's kind of like how the casino uses chips. And but you're buying pennies 100 at a time and sharing them with the content creators. So the next,
so Tyler, and Clubhouse, maybe replays could be paid by cents like that.
Yes, platforms could replicate this. You could buy 100 stars or coins or whatever you want to call them for $1, and then distribute them as you wish that way. Facebook's trying that very sincerely at the moment. I think the Satoshi version could be even more interesting if someone's able to get that going. So the next article I have is from Bloomberg. They say they have sources that Apple, which cut its projected iPhone 13 production targets for 2021 by 10 million units, tells suppliers that it may not make up the shortfall in 2022. Apple, suffering from global supply crunch, is now confronting a different problem, slowing demand for the iPhone 13. I can empathize. As an iPhone 12 Pro Max owner, I don't feel much of a need to buy the iPhone 13 Pro Max. The relative improvement is, diminishing with each new year, and I don't really see the need to upgrade. My iPhone 12 Pro Max is kind of a flawless device as far as I'm concerned. So I can see how this might be the first year where we're seeing the result of lowering demand due to incremental improvements on these not trivially priced devices.
I also see this as an indication of the overall economy and slowing consumer demand.
No doubt. The next, well, you might see is due to this live stream shopping boom that I've been describing in Asia, has led to Oppo and the Chinese handset manufacturers like Xiaomi and Oppo and Vivo and others are intentionally making devices and promoting devices that have incredibly good front-facing cameras, because that becomes the main differentiator for these social entrepreneurs, for lack of a better word, which,
it's also a way to gather that sweet data.
Yes, well, the device manufacturer, well said, Magda. For those who don't know, the device manufacturers themselves have an interest in upgrading the camera on your devices, as Apple has done on the recent MacBook Pros and iPads. And it's been a while since we did it, but for those who might be new to tech news around the world, we were blessed with some really interesting information that I will share on Twitter momentarily from our friend Nicholas in the audience here about what kind of data can be captured from your iris, from your eyeball. And if you have a really good front-facing camera, you might be exposing a whole new trove of personal bio data that you weren't aware you might be sharing, including your gender, which can be determined from your iris, not just your face, but your iris, and your age, which has a very strong inference of personal information around your gender and your age from your iris. But it could also tell your actual biometric identity. You are identifiable from your iris, just like your fingerprint. But it can also tell geographical origins, like which part of the world you're from, your physical health, if you've had a concussion, chronic pain, vision disorders, obesity, or Parkinson's disease, your cultural background, your mental health, if you've had depression, PTSD, autism, or eating disorders, your personality traits like neuroticism or curiosity or extroversion, your skills and abilities, your level of sleepiness and drug consumption like alcohol, tobacco, cocaine, MDMA, and cannabis, and your cognitive processes, and your mental workload, which could be very useful as a camera on the driver of a car, which can tell if you're sleeping, and that's already being deployed in some of the autonomous vehicles, to know if the driver is asleep. But it would also be great to know their mental capacity, their cognitive process, their drug consumption, their skills and abilities, their sleepiness, their physical health, and everything else, or their age. So here comes the data trove, through these new improved front-facing cameras. And that can build some really interesting ad networks, for sure, which Apple's doing. Oh, what a coincidence! Apple's building an ad network at the same time they're improving the front-facing cameras. Oh, I'm sure that's just a coincidence. So, the next article.
What about, Tyler?
Yes.
Tyler, what about when people using filters? I mean, does that help them in any way in not giving those facts out?
Well, you'd have to wear something over your actual face to stop from the cameras from getting that from your face.
I mean, if you're
Or
wearing
like glasses to prevent the iris to be captured.
Right. I was thinking if you're wearing glasses, or if you're pointing the phone elsewhere while the filter is turned on, and then you're talking through your filters.
No, you would have to actually have something on your face for the camera to not get that information. So, the next one from the BBC. You're right, Cheryl, from Bleeping Computer. The Department of Justice charges an ex-employee of IoT manufacturer Ubiquiti with data theft and for attempting to extort his employer while posing as a whistleblower and a hacker. Nicholas Sharp, a former employee of networking device maker Ubiquiti, was arrested and charged today with data theft and attempting to extort his company, his former employer, Ubiquiti, while posing as a whistleblower and a hacker. Wow. So, Kevin Mitnick, who's a renowned OG hacker, took to Twitter to say, here is an interesting twist on ransomware. Rogue insiders stealing data and posing as an anonymous hacker. Ubiquiti stock dropped 20%. It appears the perpetrator thought a VPN service would cloak his real identity. Same mistake that others have made and was busted. Yep, you're exactly right. You can't use a VPN to hide your identity like that. You got to go down to the public library, you dipshit. Use their computers. So, by the way, that's a hacker's joke, by the way. So, the next article is from the BBC. They say that Meta, formerly known as Facebook, will no longer block searches nor remove praise of Kyle Rittenhouse on Facebook or Instagram. And after designating him a shooter in a mass murder in 2020, Facebook has reversed their decision to block searches on its platform for the U.S. teenager who was acquitted of killing 2 people during unrest in Wisconsin. So, yes, people were being blocked for praising Kyle Rittenhouse, who a jury has acquitted, and that you know, that's an uncomfortable scenario there. And this speaks to the very difficult challenge of moderation for these platforms, where they're moderating, you know, what people are saying, and then you have, and they're in doing so are acting as a sort of court of public opinion, and then a real, you know, federal court makes a decision, and a jury of his peers rule that he was innocent, and then what happens to the platforms? It's a really interesting question. So, the next one is that Reddit announces real-time features, including live upvote, downvote, comment, and viewer counts, a typing indicator, and notifications for top-level comments. So Twitter's getting a much more live. You'll see typing indicators when people are leaving comments, and the upvote and downvote counts will all be dynamically updated in real time. Okay, that's great. And the next one is a look at China's extensive tech investments in Africa, including undersea cables, data centers, and fintech apps as part of the Digital Silk Road Initiative. As the Chinese tech stack leads from undersea cables to smartphones and fintech apps, concerns grow for the digital future of ordinary Africans. And over to you, Messi, from Ethiopia, where China built a beautiful building for the African Union in the Ethiopian capital of Addis. And it turned out that they found interesting data leaving the very beautiful African Union headquarters, sending data to Beijing every evening around 2 a.m. And then they realized that those data packages were audio recordings from inside the building. And then they found the microphones in the sofas and in the picture frames and under the desks and everywhere else. And so that's an interesting context that most Ethiopians and Addis are familiar with, and many Africans as well are becoming ever more skeptical about China using tech in Africa, which America, just we can look at recent headlines that we've been discussing in Tech News Around the World, where the FBI and government agencies in the U.S. have been recently shut down dozens of Chinese tech companies for doing corporate espionage in the U.S., most notably Hikvision cameras, the biggest camera company in the world. It's now been blacklisted out of the U.S. because those cameras were sending data back to China, just like the POS systems, the credit card swiping systems, again, the largest in the world, based in Florida, down the street from the Hikvision office in Florida as well, was also not only sending data back to China, but was also setting up for potential vulnerabilities, let's say, data extraction from within the networks of the businesses that were using that system. There was others. China Mobile, China Telecom, the telecom operator, was also banned from the U.S. for the same reason, because Chinese citizens in the U.S. were using it, and then the U.S. decided that they were extracting data and audio from those to send back to China, basically eavesdropping on Chinese students, international students at schools in the U.S., And how did they know that? Well, because some of those students found their parents being held hostage. And they were being told they had to come home or that something bad would happen to their parents. And how did they know that those students were saying things that the state didn't like? Well, ostensibly because they were using China Mobile, and China Mobile is a state-backed company, and you can connect those dots. So this is all interesting context for why Africa might want to think very carefully about China's investments, especially with regard to tech on the continent, as this article puts it, as the Digital Silk Road Initiative. Adriana?
Tyler, I don't know if you also mentioned before, but like Europe is planning also like a big fiber optic cable to link directly between South America and South America and Europe, to have like a close connectivity and not rely on other cables where those things can happen.
With this cable issues, now I think some people are starting to get familiar with it. Equally, it's of concern that Facebook and Google are becoming two of the most active international cable providers in 2021. These used to be kind of government initiatives, and now they're becoming very private initiatives. And Google and Facebook, more than anybody, are the big players in these international cables now. I would say even Google, even more than Facebook. And there's been really interesting geopolitical issues lately with regard to this, where there was a plan to put one in Hong Kong, but now that Hong Kong has become under much more tightly controlled by the CCP, the U.S. said, no, you cannot give that cable to Hong Kong, so they're rerouting it to, I recall it was Vietnam and the Philippines or Singapore or something like that. So it's a very...
I did work for the cable arm for Telefonica. They did own one of the biggest cables going around Latin America, and was like a double cable. Even if it got cut, it could route it backwards, and also was unique situation we had. I don't know what happened in the end, because they end up selling this side of the company, but they have one of the best boxes just nearby Cuba. So they could be like the first one to link Cuba directly there with Latin America and everything. But again, Telefonica chose to sell that part of the company, and I don't know what is end so far.
Okay. So this article about the Digital Silk Road Initiative, the journalist who's from Africa says, for some observers, they're talking about Senegal, that declaring Senegalese digital sovereignty enabled and funded by China can sound like a contradiction in terms, but it's really just one facet of a wider issue captured by the deepening tech-telecoms relationship between China and nearly every African country over the past 2 decades, and crucially, what it pretends for the economic future of the continent. This week, debates were front of mind for analysts, diplomats, and tech leaders, with Dakar as the backdrop for the Triennial Forum on the Chinese-Africa Cooperation, the most important engagement platform between Chinese and African leaders. Dakar's roads were lined with billboards featuring images of President Sall and Chinese President Xi Jinping welcoming dignitaries from China and across Africa. Though Xi, who has not left the country since the beginning of the pandemic, will not be there this year. But it is the evolution of the Digital Silk Road, a term coined by Xi in 2015, that has quietly become a contentious topic for China-Africa watchers. The Digital Silk Road, or the DSR, includes everything from cross-border e-commerce, smart cities, and fintech apps through to big data, Internet of Things, smartphones, and undersea cables. These projects don't grab headlines with shiny new Chinese-built airports and railways or spark panicked fears of China's debt-trap diplomacy like the regular Belt and Road, but the unfettered influence of Chinese firms developing every step of the digital ecosystem in nearly all African countries has become a growing point of concern, particularly for China's rivals in the United States. Yeah, very much so. Well, America is warning all of its allies, don't use Huawei. That's that 5G antenna is corporate espionage. And so we're being very vocal about that. Or when I say we, I used to be American. So, and the Netherlands is reportedly lab experts in the Netherlands have reported exactly that the Huawei 5G antennas that were in the Netherlands were doing exactly that. So, hence it's kind of exacerbating and amplifying the need to decouple technologically economically from China. So, the next article, shall we, Cheryl? Let's see what the next one is. The Verge says federal judge blocks a Texas law that limits large social media platforms' ability to moderate content, saying it violates the platform's First Amendment rights. Here we go. We read that article. The first part of this article was a few weeks ago. There was the Texas, I believe it was the Texas governor, was behind making a new law which would limit social media's platforms' abilities to moderate content. Meaning, if you can't stop me from saying what I want to say, for example, they were, as we just read a couple headlines ago, Facebook was removing praise for Kyle Rittenhouse, for example, and Texas was saying you can't do that in Texas. I have freedom of speech in Texas, and now a federal judge at the government level, the national level, that means federal judge is blocking the local Texas law that limits the large social media platform's ability to moderate content, saying that Texas law violates the platform's First Amendment rights, that the platform's First Amendment rights take precedence over the user's rights, which is common sense. This is what we predicted when we read about this Texas law several weeks ago. We knew how this would end up, that this was purely political kabuki theater, because you clicked the I agree button, and in your terms of service, you agreed to the fact that the platform can moderate your content. You agreed to that on their platform. It's their platform. It's their store. And if you don't like how they operate their store, you can shop somewhere else. And so we analyzed this, and I remember some of the points that people made when Texas passed this law about how it's purely political posturing by the Texas governor, I recall, trying to get a little bit of his name out there and maybe build up his profile for a potential presidential campaign in the future. So that one's been shot down as we knew that it would. Judge Pittman also objected to rules that required publishing detailed moderation reports, because the Texas law said, if you are going to moderate, you must keep close tabs and accounting of what you're doing and how you're doing it so we can review it and audit it. And the judge says, no, they don't have to do that. It's their platform. They can do whatever they want. And it's really ironic, honestly, because Texas traditionally is all about letting businesses do whatever the fuck they want without the government meddling in their affairs. If you had to pick one concept that Texas believes in more than all others, it's for businesses to operate autonomously and independent of meddling from the government. So that's what makes this so ironic, that they're expecting the social media platforms to be meddled with by this Texas law. Truly ironic. So, but they don't like being silenced because they want to be able to say, things that the platforms don't necessarily want them to say. Okay, so and as we said, this is kind of a no-brainer from an American legal perspective. The platforms can do whatever they want, and you as a user agreed to it. That's what makes this so kind of, stupid in a way. The next one, from the Washington Post. Planned Parenthood, Los Angeles, says a hacker gained access to its network in October, compromising the information of 400,000 participants, including clinical data. A hacker gained access to the personal information of hundreds of thousands of Planned Parenthood patients in October. And rather than read the Washington Post version, let's read the Bleeping Computer version, because they have actual geeks who work there who could probably understand the technicalities of this issue. According to a data breach notification sent to Planned Parenthood Los Angeles patients, the cyber attack occurred between October 9th and 17th, allowing threat actors to steal files from the compromised network. Quote, on October 17, we identified suspicious activity in our computer network. We immediately took our service systems offline, notified law enforcement, and third-party cybersecurity firm was engaged to assist in our investigation. The investigation determined that the unauthorized person gained access to our network between October 9 and 17 and exfiltrated some files from our system during that time. In a statement to the Washington Post, who first reported the breach, the Planned Parenthood Los Angeles spokesperson, John Erickson, said that the stolen files contained the personal data of approximately 400,000 patients and was caused by a ransomware attack. When threat actors conduct ransomware attacks, they lurk in a compromised network for days, if not weeks, while quietly stealing files and uploading them to their servers. Once they've finished harvesting valuable data, the threat actors deploy ransomware to encrypt all the devices on the network. They then use the stolen data as leverage to scare victims into paying ransom, or the data will be publicly released on a ransomware gang's data leak site. It is unknown what ransomware gang is responsible for the attack and whether a ransom has been paid. Well, it's somewhat now becoming rather illegal to pay it, and the FBI gets very directly involved in trying to use the payment as a way to figure out who the attacker is, which is why they don't want you paying. They want to pay on your behalf so they can follow the money, or the bitcoins as it usually is, or cryptos. However, if a ransom is not paid, we will likely learn who is responsible after the data is published, as the stolen data is said to contain medical information, including the procedures undertaken at Planned Parenthood LA. The public release of the data could significantly impact affected patients. Yeah.
You know, Tyler, this is a little bit off topic, but I just can't help but make a comment on it. In Poland right now, like one of the laws which is waiting to be published, so like it kind of passed, but it's not in effect until it gets published, is that like basically all abortions are illegal, including if the woman's life is in danger. So basically, if, you know, like you're a woman and you're pregnant and it's you or the baby, it's the baby. Like you don't have a choice. You don't have a say in the matter. So it's kind of crazy. And now like what they're trying to do is they're trying to make a registry of all pregnancies. So if as a woman you get pregnant and you go and make a test that says that you're pregnant, that's registered. So it's funny how you're talking about, you know, this ransomware attack, how this data is just like so, you know, private, right? Like it shouldn't be out there. And here I am in a country where in the EU, where they're actually trying to kind of gather this data.
Yeah. Poland's a bit interesting politically at the moment, yeah. So, the next article that I have is, give me 2 seconds to adjust, here we go. In an internal Slack message, Mark Benioff says Salesforce co-CEO Brett Taylor will continue to report to him. Brett Taylor is co-CEO of Salesforce in name only, it turns out. The information has learned that in his new role, Taylor will continue to report to Mark Benioff, who is ostensibly his equal as co-CEO. However, with this new internal Slack message, which, by the way, Salesforce owns Slack. So, curious to know who leaked this internal message over there in Salesforce. But so it's a bit of a ruse, perhaps. The next one, Congress will hold a hearing with CEOs from Coinbase, Circle, FTX, Bituary, Paxos, and Stellar on December 8 to discuss digital assets and the future of finance. Here we go, making some progress. Let's have a meeting with the biggest exchanges and players. Those names that I just read are some of the biggest exchanges and players in the whole crypto space. So Congress, I hopefully this is recorded and even live streamed, because that's going to be a comedy show watching U.S. Congress members trying to get their heads around Ethereum, for example. So get ready for a real moment of of endless giggles. Congress hearing with CEOs from the biggest crypto exchanges. That's going to be fun to watch. So,
my mind is going back, Tyler, to the Facebook hearings and just those cringy scenes.
I don't even know how we're going to how long that hearing is going to take to even begin to explain what a Bitcoin is. I mean, they're going to have to start there. So, let alone what an NFT is, let alone what Ethereum is. I mean, there's not enough time in those senators' lives to absorb that information.
That's pretty good already. In Japan, some of them don't even know what's a USB.
Okay, so AWS, Amazon Web Services, announces SageMaker Studio Lab, a free version of SageMaker in public preview to help customers with little experience build, train, and deploy machine learning models. At their big annual event called reInvent, the cloud giant AWS also announced a new $10 million AI and machine learning scholarship program for underrepresented and underserved students. That's SageMaker Studio Lab as a free version of SageMaker for public preview is a very cool concept to get more and more folks easier and easier tools to start dabbling in machine learning models. The next one from TechCrunch, Sounding Board, which operates a marketplace that connects employees with leadership coaches, raises $30 million. It started as a platform to connect leaders to coaches through a marketplace, realized early in the pandemic that mentorship needs a refresh. And so now they've got $30 million to pursue that. The next one from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, that's a new publication for us. It says they have research that Amazon revenue from third-party sellers will reach $121 billion this year, up from $60 billion 2 years ago, as sellers' fees reach 34%, up from 30% in 2018 and 19% in 2024. Yeah, well, that's how capitalism works. If you are in a great position and you can start raising your fees, and eventually you'll raise your fees so high you'll inspire competitors with lower fees. Okay, next up, Bloomberg reporting that Uber adds ride booking via WhatsApp in India. Told you! Did I predict that was coming or not? Through the super apps. Through WhatsApp, specifically. Did I not say that WhatsApp would add, specifically, ride sharing through things like Uber, as WhatsApp is copying WeChat in China? And for those who don't know, Cheryl, you can verify my prediction that this would happen with WhatsApp as it starts to become a super app, as it starts to clone its competitor in China, which is WeChat. Because what's happening is very easily predictable by people who live in Asia, like Cheryl and I do. So, WhatsApp in the US is a messaging app, almost exclusively. They have a competitor in China called WeChat, who started out just like they did with a nearly identical name and nearly identical logo. But WhatsApp noticed that WeChat was doing something truly amazing. They had added the ability to pay for things, and everyone was using it. In fact, it became the default way that everyone did everything. But the critical first step was becoming a payment system. And once the payment system was in place, then you could add all the other apps, very notably ride-sharing, so that you could start booking ride-sharing directly in the app, because you have your wallet and your money in the app, and you can do the transfer of the payment right in the app without ever leaving the messaging app, which in China is WeChat. And they went far beyond that. It went into dating and Airbnb, and every app you can think of wanted to jump into WeChat in China, and it became a Swiss Army knife of all the apps. Because, think about it. If you were a little Airbnb app and you're trying to get users, what if you could partner with this messaging app that allows for payments that has 3 billion users? Hell yeah, I would love 3 billion users. That would be amazing. Count me in. Right, well, that's why the WeChat in China became a super app, a Swiss Army knife of dozens and dozens of functions and features and partnerships. And I've said all along, watch, WhatsApp is going to do this. They can't not do this. It has made their competitor in China so incredibly powerful that they must be pursuing this. And we've been watching the headlines recently that WhatsApp in India added payments. I said, watch what happens next. They're going to add ride sharing with Uber. Guaranteed. And here's the headline today. Uber adds ride booking via WhatsApp in India. Just like I said they would. In the northern city of Lucknow, expanding to more locations in the near future. Integration is a global first for Uber, company says. Users can book a ride with a message on the chat program, just like has been happening in China for, 7 years. So, the next one's from the New York Times. A look at Particle, founded by an ex-Christie's executive and others, which plans to split Banksy's Love is in the Air into 10,000 pieces to be sold as NFTs. A former Christie's executive has joined cryptocurrency experts to create a company that purchases art and sells the fragments as NFTs. What do you mean? Are you actually physically cutting? Why are you calling it fragments? You mean ownership fragments or physical fragments? Because that would be kind of absurd. In the latest example of art market disruption, a prominent...
Is it those so-called derivatives you're talking about?
Well, I don't know, Cheryl. You just interrupted me while I was trying to read the answer to that question. The executive, Loic Gauzer, who upended the traditional auction format while he was at Christie's, most notably orchestrating the sale of the $450 million Leonardo da Vinci painting in 2017, has helped found the company Particle, a platform that merges art and technology with a goal of reaching a broader pool of potential buyers. Quote, when I was a kid and I was looking at auctions and catalogs, I always felt it was impossible to participate financially and that I was, by definition, excluded. Fractionalizing the works in 10,000 NFTs allows a much wider audience to be part of the collecting experience. Of course, you can enjoy art when you go to a museum, but the enjoyment from art comes also with owning it, he continued. That's why people collect. If successful, the venture could help fuel a burgeoning category of competition in the art market, which, with consortiums of multiple buyers challenging preeminence of billionaire collectors at a time when the pandemic has accelerated online commerce. NFTs have become increasingly popular, accounting for 1/3 of online sales, or 2% of the overall art market. Last month, thousands of cryptocurrency fans calling themselves the Constitution DAO pooled their money in a bid on the original printing of the Constitution at Sotheby's. Longtime collectors remain skeptical of NFTs, and art experts say the Particle enterprise is just the latest iteration of a virtual art world that has yet to be proven. Quote, a work of art is a unique object, and collectors who love art want to own the object itself, said Megan Fox Kelly, the president of the Association of Professional Art Advisors. Quote, the NFT is a separate entity from the object. I think we're still in the very early days of understanding how these NFTs exist as works of art, Kelly said. Right now, they appear to be investment vehicles with potentially very significant returns, and conversations around them focused on that. The physical Banksy painting called Love is in the Air, which features the image of a bomb thrower hurtling a bouquet of flowers, is to be exhibited starting December 3rd at Art Basel in Miami. The Banksy was divided into 100 by 100 grid, resulting in 10,000 unique squares or particles, which will be sold as NFTs for about $1,500 each. Every particle represents a minority ownership in the painting and will come with a collector's card that shows the whole artwork as well as the particle's location on the painting. I see. So they don't actually destroy it, but they draw invisible lines in a 100 by 100 grid, making 10,000 small squares on the artwork, and then you own that piece of the artwork. This is becoming a little bit tortured as a concept. But does anyone have a comment on this interesting idea of how to do fractional ownership of this Banksy in this particular way? Okay. Next up, the face.
Just quickly, Tyler. Sorry. Does anybody else remember the web page they did there? What was it? It was the $1 million web page. It was years ago.
Oh, sorry. I just muted everybody. Sorry, Carl. Go ahead.
Sorry, man. Yeah, it was years ago, wasn't it? Can you remember that? It was just a web page, and it was in the early days of HTML, and you paid. It was $1 for 1 pixel.
Correct. Yeah, you could buy.
This smacks of that. It's like it's funny. It gets like news lines, but is it functional in any way?
Technically, is it still an NFT if it's broken into pieces? Because, like, technically the definition of an NFT is that it's like one single piece. So technically the whole painting should be an NFT. What they've actually done is they've tokenized the painting. So, like, in my understanding, the whole thing should be the NFT. And then, like, the parts of it, the 100 parts are like tokens that make up the NFT. So, like, I'm not really sure why they're calling each and every single piece an NFT. It's weird.
Well, they wanted to make, for whatever reason, this 10,000, was pioneered with the CryptoPunks, and it's been replicated consistently, because it seems like people feel like having one of 10,000 is somehow still meaningful, rather than, say, one of 1,000,000. So, and if you only have 1,000 pieces, you are, leaving a lot of money on the table. So you could get potentially 10 times the money by having 10,000 pieces.
Yeah, it's like selling actions, right? Like, if you have a company, you can buy ownership of the company, or you can buy, a fraction of the company by purchasing its, like, stocks. Sorry.
But so it is weird, though, because does somebody not own this actual piece of artwork, the physical piece? And if they do,
that's the NFT then, right?
Your fractional ownership. No, I mean the physical painting.
Tyler?
Yes.
There is like a company, a startup called Masterworks that have been done that with real art. So it's like real art. They own a gallery in New York, and they do fraction of paintings.
Yeah. Well,
but like one thing here that differentiate here is
Adriana,
the fact that it's all digital.
Adriana,
my only question here is what is the right? Because right now,
Adriana. So if the point is, if there's these NFT holders, and then you have the physical piece. The physical piece, whoever does own that, enjoys that in their home. They can resell it. They put it in their house. They put it wherever they want. You, as the fractional owner, have no say whatsoever in what the actual owner does with it. What good is really owning a fractional ownership if it doesn't include any rights at all? Or if that...
Well, you don't know what rights it includes. That's written into the contract, right? So, like, that's what the NFT would actually say. Like, what is your...
So in a court of law, there are no recognized rights. That's the point. When it comes to real life, when it comes to the actual physical object, there is nothing to back you up right now. This is the problem that all NFT artists are facing at the moment.
Yeah, but the idea at least like for this startup that I was mentioned before, you own a piece of a Basquiat that is in a gallery in New York, and if this Basquiat is sold, you have a piece of that. But in the other side, on the NFT, the rights is most like, you can put as a picture in Twitter, and as a picture in Twitter. But if all the 10,000 or 1,000 people put that picture in Twitter, that would sound like, crazy.
So just the key difference on that, though, is that it's very, very different when you start talking about tying it to a physical object, because the rules of the game are completely different. So, this is something that needs to be it's the same as tying, having the NFT of land. I can't remember what the site is called that is just absolutely killing it at the moment, Decentraland or something. You don't actually have any rights to that piece of land. It's just a representation of it. So, and just quickly to answer, Magda, your point, I believe you were saying about the options, there is a little bit of difference, as in options are essentially kind of fungible in the sense that they are identical. There is no real difference between them. Whereas if you're talking about this, if you're actually mapping the fractional NFT, the shares as it were, to a specific section of a painting. Mine's the top left corner. That is actually non-fungible, not fungible, because it's non-replicatable. It represents a unique, the hash represents a unique thing that can't be traded for another like piece, if that makes sense. I mean, this is cool.
Yeah.
This needs to be sorted out, but the worry is that as cool as these things are, they're just like really hyped up, a lot of them really hyped up Ponzi schemes that have some really awesome technology behind it that's going to be sweet in the future, but law doesn't support it at the moment, and a lot of people are getting burned continuously on this. And when this kind of happens, the result normally is that regulators who don't understand it and who just see the horror stories like overstep the mark and come in and just, they come in heavy-handed, they come in with the whole stick, and then everybody suffers for it.
So, but see, that's the thing. Like, my friend, for example, has a blockchain-based company that does real estate as NFTs, and what they do essentially in the NFT contracts is that they use the law that you have right now as like an underlying layer to the NFT. So, they're kind of going before where the market goes with this, because it's not really regulated right now. But at some point it probably will be, just because it's so much more functional than the system that works right now. So what they do is they sell the NFT together with all the contracts and papers that you need to have to prove that you actually do hold ownership of the real estate, right? So they can do the exact same thing with the NFT of any kind of art. You can own just the rights to the kind of electronic copy of it in the virtual world, or you can, have it specified in the contract that you also have some kind of ownership to the physical asset, but it needs to be specified.
Hello, can I make a comment?
Go ahead, Shahin.
First of all, Carl, I was thinking exactly that website, the $1 Million homepage. And I think
yes.
In England, was a student in England who did it, and he actually ended up selling most of those pixels for £1 each or something. But
he did, yeah.
NFTs. I think the difference here is that exactly what you talked about, which is the rights management of this. And the rights management for NFTs is just a mess, and there will be lots of lawsuits before it settles, because it's not communicated well. When it is, people don't read it, and there will be surprises. So that's a big part of it.
Yep. Shahin, when you're speaking now, do you hear an echo of yourself?
I do.
Okay.
And in fact, the Twitter voices come in quite loud, and it freaks you too a little bit.
Okay. And how about now? I'm going to mute myself, and I want to see if it fixes the problem. Go ahead and count to 5.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I think that stopped it seems.
Okay, I figured out the problem. Thank you. So the next story is crypto trading volume in Indonesia this year reached $50 billion by October, up over 10x year over year, 10 times, despite the government and the Ulema Council forbidding crypto payments. Next up, Match Group, which owns Tinder, will pay $441 million to settle claims by Tinder founders and executives that Match avoided paying them up to $2 billion by undervaluing the app in mid-2017. And I got to break out the applause right here on this one. That's my man, Sean Rad, getting payday right there. Let's try and ping in Sean Rad here into. Let's see if he's awake. How do I ping somebody in? They don't have a ping in feature. I guess I can share the room via DM on Twitter. Let's do that. Invite via DM. And let's invite in Sean Rad, who was the CEO. There he is. Let's try and ping him in. Send. Okay. Let's see if Sean will pop in here and give us an update now that this is all public. Match Group, which acquired Tinder, and there was a lawsuit going on for quite a while. It was started, I remember it pre-COVID, and that Sean and I were talking about this, and that he was going to sue because they screwed him over in the sale of this company. and by lowering the valuation, undervaluing it by $2 billion. And so he took it to court. And now Match is settling it and they're going to give up $441 million rather than have the trial and risk losing $2 billion. Very interesting. I want to read this one. And keep an eye out for someone named Sean Rad joining the Twitter stage here. And Cheryl, let me know if you see him. So it says, here we go. It says, company says it will pay $441 million to the plaintiffs. So it's, I believe, Sean and Justin and Jonathan, who are the other two co-founders, were all in this suit together. It says, Match has settled a lawsuit filed by a group of founders and executives of the Tinder dating app that had alleged the company undervalued Tinder to cheat them out of billions of dollars. Match said in a regulatory filing Wednesday it had agreed to pay $441 million to the plaintiffs in the lawsuit, which was filed 3 years ago. Yep, as I said. The plaintiffs, including Tinder co-founders Sean Rad, Justin Mateen, and Jonathan Badin, had alleged that Match and IAC Interactive cheated them out of as much as $2 billion by manipulating financial information to undermine Twitter's valuation. As part of the settlement, the plaintiffs agreed to drop all their claims against Match that are on trial and in arbitration, Match said, adding that it plans to pay the settlement using cash it has on hand. The representative for the plaintiffs declined to comment on the settlement. Tinder, the product of an IAC incubator for startups, was launched in 2012. Match, Tinder's parent company, had been an IAC subsidiary, but was spun out as a public company in 2015. In the lawsuit, the plaintiffs said part of their compensation from Match and IAC came in the form of Tinder stock options that were set to convert to March shares in 2017. They allege Match shares in 2017. They allege Match and IAC conducted a disinformation campaign using false information and projections to value Tinder at $3 billion in mid-2017, a figure the plaintiffs claim should have been far higher. At the time of the lawsuit was filed, Match and IAC said the valuation process was rigorous and followed contractually defined procedures. IAC no longer had an ownership stake in Match. A Match spokeswoman said when Match separated from IAC, it agreed to fully indemnify IAC for the costs of Tinder litigation, she said. Well, looks like my boys got an extra $440 million. Well done, Sean. They deserve. This to me, I'm obviously very biased, but I'm obviously happy for my friend that he got a very nice payday there. So the next one, Sam has his hand up here. Let's see what Sam wants to say. Welcome, Sam. The next one says Tel Aviv-based Front Egg, which helps SaaS companies track user data, raises $25 million. Meta, known as Facebook, selects AWS as its long-term strategic cloud provider, a partnership that includes helping AWS customers run PyTorch framework more effectively. Blockchain audit service called Certix raises $80 million. And those are your big boring headlines for today, December 2nd. And that takes us right there to the top of the hour, unless somebody has a hot tweet they would like to share before we meet next time, where we will dive much deeper into the tweets. Hey,
interesting one for you.
Go ahead.
I just tagged you on that. It is related to the laser telecommunication trial by NASA, which is probably going to happen live on the 5th. This promises to have very fast communications based on optical communications now instead of RF. And think about it like you're using fiber without the fiber. So I think it's just a matter of time we got here. It has a lot of promise, and it's not just for space telecommunications. I think this has also some terrestrial uses as well. But we wait and see how it's going to go with NASA. That's it. I yield.
Yep, NASA is taking step towards the next era of space communications with the launch of its Laser Communication Relay Demonstration, the LCRD, on Sunday, December 5th. Live coverage of the launch is scheduled to air on NASA television The agency's first end-to-end laser relay system, the LCRD, is set to launch as part of the U.S. Space Force Space Systems Command Space Test Program 3, STP-3, which will launch on the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. Its 2-hour launch window opens at 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Laser communications, also called optical communications because they use light to send information, offer higher data rates than traditional radio frequency systems. You know, because light goes faster than sound, you know. Enabling more data to be transmitted with each transmission. LCRD will demonstrate space-to-ground laser communications linking ground systems in Hawaii and California. Later in the mission, the LCRD will receive and transmit data from an optical terminal that NASA will place on the International Space Station.
Tyler, if I may add something, it has nothing to do with light and sound. It's in both cases, it's RF telecommunications.
Yeah, radio frequency, yeah.
Yeah, and light, they're both running at the speed of light, which is good, but you're able to encode more when you're using light than you can when you're using RF, whatever the frequency is.
I was reading way too fast on that one. So thank you for that one, Sam, and we will save the rest of the tweets that everyone's tweeting in for when we meet next time, which is in precisely 6 hours. So a big thank you to everybody for joining us for another Tech News Around the World, and do join us again and follow me on Twitter here, or the Tech News Twitter account.